I want you to stop and consider the amount of computing power that you probably have access to right now. Within your reach is probably things like a mobile phone, a desktop, a tablet, and maybe multiples of these. These devices and the software they contain are extremely powerful compared to what previous generations have had access to. However, I would suggest to you that they're probably not being used at their optimal level. Stop and think about it. Do you have more free time? Can you honestly say that the computing power that you have access to has really made your life easier? Has it given you more free time? Generally, most people will say they are far busier today than they've ever been. Now, is that because technology has made things more difficult, or is that because technology is something that we haven't optimized the way that we use? I would suggest to you that a lot of this has to do with the fact that we haven't really used the technology to the level that we should. Most technologies that we have access to have far more capabilities than most of us take advantage of. This is particularly the case when it comes to things like automation. So stop and think about probably the most common aspect or the most common program that people use being Outlook or their email client. When an email arrives, most people deliver it to the inbox and then leave it there to be triaged. Very few people, in my experience, actually go in and configure things like rules to automate the movement of non-critical, non-important emails to other locations to be reviewed at a later stage. So by allowing your inbox to be cluttered up with information which isn't a priority, again, causes distractions, causes you not to spend the time on what's required, and again, technology becomes a hindrance rather than a helper. So what I want to cover in this video is basically how to look at the Office 365 product, which more and more businesses have access to, and really show you the automation processes that are available through the range of services it provides. Now, the automation processes are basically things that will have to be configured. You'll have to sit in there and do a little bit of work to get the most out of these processes. Automation doesn't automatically enable itself and doesn't automatically spring to your aid. You'll need to go in there and configure this, and it's not difficult. It doesn't require programming skills. It just requires an understanding of how to use the automation tool, and there are lots and lots of choices, and it also requires a little bit of time up front to basically take the process that you're looking to simplify and begin to automate it. So again, take the simple processes, automate those, and then build on that. So what we're going to look at is the range of automation options that are available that are designed to make your life easier with the services that are included with a product like Office 365. Now, the first of these that are available to most SKUs are the Office applications that you download onto the desktop. So Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, these products typically include macros. These macros are built on Visual Basic, which is a programming code behind the scenes. Now, this means that what you can use is you've got a full programming environment typically through the range of Office products. You can also use lots of automation options within these to make your life easier. So again, stop and think about how often you use products like Excel and Outlook on your desktop every day. Are they optimized? Are they automating as much as they can? The repetitive tasks that you do regularly, or your staff do, or others in the business do, really, how could you automate these to save time? Now, it may not seem like a lot of time saved when you look at it individually, but as time goes along, you end up saving more and more. So it's a bit like compound interest. You do need to invest up front, and the payoffs are down the track, but the payoffs can be quite significant. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look here at an example which I believe is probably the most powerful automation desktop application, that being Excel. So with that said, let's just pop out and have a demo of what's possible with automation when it comes to Excel. Okay, so I'm here on my desktop. You'll see that I have my Excel workbook open. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and populate a few cells as we would working on a spreadsheet. Now, if we need to do a number of repetitive tasks on these 3 cells, we could step through those and repeat those quite quickly. But really what we should be thinking about is how can we automate them once we're starting to do these on a regular basis. Now, Excel gives me the ability to go in here and click on an option to record a macro. So I'm just going to record a macro. So what that's now going to do, it's going to watch my actions and it's going to keep track of those. So what I'm going to do here is I'll go back to home and let's make this, for example, a different color. Let's make it bold and let's make it maybe a slightly different font. All right. Now that I've finished that process, what I can do is I basically go back and I will stop the recording. All right, now what's happened in the background here is if I go to the macros area, you'll see that Excel has automatically recorded a macro here for me. Now, if I go into the edit option, you'll see that I'm thrown into a basic editor, and this shows you the visuals, a basic code that has been created automatically for me. So I don't necessarily need to be a programmer. I can just record a sequence of events and you'll see that Excel will automatically generate the code for me. Now, if I want to get in and do some coding, I can certainly go in and I can make changes, I can update, I can extend this, but as you see, you get a full programming environment built into Excel. Now, what I can then do is obviously go to another cell, I can then go to my macros, and then I can rerun that exact same macro and get exactly the same result. So what I'm able to do now is take a repetitive process, record it, and then replay it anywhere inside that spreadsheet. Now, it is also possible for those macros to call other spreadsheets, to pull other spreadsheets, and if we start looking at the power that is available to us in Excel, you can see that we can go in and get data from a range of sources here, including things on the web. Now, imagine if you could automate that process. If you wanted to go out and get statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, you could go and do that, pull that out automatically, bring it into your spreadsheet, update your figures. So effectively all the options you see here that are available in Excel, you can basically go in and you can record a macro and it will record your steps and then allow you to replay them at any point. Now we can make this even easier. So what we can do here is I can go in here, for example, and I can go in and insert a button anywhere in my spreadsheet. And when I insert a button, I can tie that to a macro. So now that I've got a button there, I go to my third cell. All I've got to do is push that button, and that button will automatically execute the macro that I have connected to it. So what you can have is you could have a sheet that is just buttons at the front of your Excel spreadsheet, and every time you click on it, it goes away and runs a preset number of commands. Now, again, remember the real power of this is to record what you're doing, replay it at any time using macros. So again, all Microsoft Office applications generally have this fully blown macro engine behind it. And again, you can get very sophisticated with this and have those macros call other processes within Windows, call other processes within other programs. So again, this is a pretty powerful development environment that you can use that most people already have on their desktop. Now, the next option that we have available to us is a product called SharePoint Designer. So SharePoint Designer has the benefit that it is a free download from Microsoft and allows you to go in and automate processes in SharePoint. So this allows you to create something called workflows, and they can then be tied to document libraries, lists, and so on within SharePoint. Now, the disadvantage of SharePoint Designer is that Microsoft has deprecated this product, which means that it still works and it is still supported for a time, but there are no versions beyond the current version of 2013. So Office has moved on to 2016, but unfortunately SharePoint Designer is deprecated, which means it will basically not see another version. However, that doesn't mean that it still can't be used to automate some very basic processes. So with that in mind, let's just pop out and have a look at what is possible with SharePoint Designer. So you'll see here that I've fired up my SharePoint Designer. I have connected it to a SharePoint site on Office 365. So this is the SharePoint site here. You'll see that it's a site called Blank, and I'm currently in a document library with no documents in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a workflow that will send me an email alert when a new item is created. Now what I'll need to do is I'll just go into lists and libraries, and you'll see that I have a list of all the items in that site. So then I go in and select documents. You'll see now I get the ability to customize the settings. I also get the views, so I can access a lot of this back-end information directly with SharePoint Designer. But if I scroll down here, what you'll see is you'll see that I have an option here called workflows. Okay, so what workflows is going to allow me to do is go in and create a new workflow. So I'm going to go in and create a new workflow. I'm going to give this workflow a name. So I'm going to call this new document alert. All right, I'm going to go OK. So this is now going to place me into the SharePoint Designer editor. Now what you'll see here is basically I get a block arrangement for creating code. So it's not really line by line code. Basically I connect the blocks together. So you'll see up here that what I can do is I can go in here and create conditions, and I can also have a number of actions around. So what I'm going to do is select the option here to create an email. I'm going to select the hyperlink which says which users. Now what I'm going to do is go in here and put in the email address of the person who I want to send the alert to. It'll do the lookup and put it in there. You'll see that in the subject I can put in here plain text. So if I put in here, new document was created, but I can also go in here and generate a function, do lookups, and I can also create a string builder here if I want. Now what I can do in the body, so I'll put in this portion here, a new document was created on the list by, right? And then what I can do again here is I can go in here and put a lookup, right? So look up the current item, and what I can do here was let's go in and put created by and go OK and finish that off. Okay, now once I've finished that off, you'll see that what's going to happen next. So what's the transition I want to make? So I'm going to go in here and set in an action, and I'm going to go to a stage, and in this stage I'm just going to end the workflow. Now what we can do is we can obviously combine a number of stages together. You'll see that I have the ability to add a stage here. I can add steps, I can loop, I can do parallel blocks, so there is a fair amount of flexibility here. Now what I'm going to do is select the workflow options here, and one of the options that I've got under the start options is how this will be triggered. Okay, so this workflow at the moment will be triggered manually, but you'll see that I can start the workflow either when an item is created or when an item is changed. So I'm going to select both of those. Now that's done, I'm going to publish my workflow. So what that's going to do is it's going to push and compile in a way that code into the SharePoint document library in my Office 365. If there aren't any errors, it'll come back and let me know it has done that successfully for me. So that means now when I go in and create a new document in that workflow will be triggered because I've created a new item, and then the code or the process that I've created behind the scenes will then execute, and what we should see is we should see that an email has indeed been sent to us. So we'll take a moment. I'll put so our workflow has now completed, has been uploaded. So if we go back to our lists and libraries, we go into our documents again, we scroll down to the side here. Okay, we'll see that we basically have a workflow included, right? So if we now go out to our document library, so there's our document library, let's go in here and just create a new Word document. And by doing so, that will trigger our workflow. So I'll go in here and put in a new document, wait a minute or two for that to be saved, and then I'll just pop back to the document library and confirm that has indeed been created. So take a moment for it to save initially. So let's go back to our document library here, and we'll see that we have a new document in there. Now if we pop across to our emails, Again, it may take a moment or two for that email to arrive, so let's just pause the video and wait for that email to arrive in my inbox. So in a matter of moments, we see that that email has been generated and sent to me. You'll see that the new document was created on the list, and that was who created it. And there's the remainder of the body of our email. So again, what we can do is we can take a tool like SharePoint Designer, which unfortunately is currently being deprecated, but it still is operational with Office 365 SharePoint Online. We can connect to our site. We can then manage the site using the tools that are available to SharePoint Designer. And one of those is the ability to go in and create workflows. We can go back in here, select the workflow, and we can edit the workflow and then extend it. Now, one of the challenges with using code that is simplified like this is that the recommendation is it works very well in a linear arrangement, so something changes, then complete this process. Things become more difficult to manage and to code logically when you need to do looping, when you need to do conditions, when you need to do more complex programming. So in this case, I would suggest that SharePoint Designer works very well for linear processes that basically once it's initiated, it goes through to completion, rather than doing complex checking and choicing and also looping and things like that. So it's a great tool, but again, because it does provide a simplified way of coding, there may be some limitations for those who need advanced options. Now, there are a number of tools, third-party tools, that can reach in and connect to Office 365 services. So two of these are If This Then That and Zapier. So If This Then That basically is a free tool that you can connect to services like your Outlook email, to SharePoint, to a range of different items in Office 365, and the same with Zapier, and then you can take a number of automated actions. Now, both of these products also connect to third-party services outside Office 365, so this means that you can start combining the two services together. So maybe you want to do something with your Gmail, import it into SharePoint or into your Outlook. You can do that with either of these tools. So why don't we just pop out and have a look at those as well. Okay, so we're looking here at If This Then That, so IFTTT.com. Basically create an account, and then what we need to do is we need to go in and connect up to a number of services here. So you'll see that If This Then That has a wide range of services, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you'll notice here that it also has Office 365 and Microsoft services you can connect to. Now, once you connect to those services using a suitable account, then you can create a process. So for example, what I do in my case is that when I post a new blog post, the If This Then That will pick that up, and for example, it will post it to Facebook, it will post it to LinkedIn, but also what it will do is it will also take that post and also put it to OneNote. So I have a OneNote stored on the web. It will take every blog post, take the body, and save that automatically into a OneNote file that I have. So here's that OneNote file here. You'll see that it's got a list of all the blog posts that I create. Now, putting it into a OneNote gives me a number of advantages. The first is that basically what it does, it gives me a backup of my information. So it's automatically, effectively backing up every post that I make in my blog to another location. Now, that location is on the web, but the great thing about OneNote is that I can synchronize that OneNote to my desktop. I can synchronize that to my mobile device as well. Now, the other advantage is that everything that is in OneNote is searchable. So I can go up to the top corner up here, do a search, and then look for any information. So that means that all the information that I've written and put up there in my blog is now available offline for me as well. So that's an advantage of taking information that I'm posting out to the web on a regular basis, but making a duplicate or a backup copy automatically, so I don't have to worry about it. It happens without me thinking, to a product like OneNote. So you see here I've got a number of different recipes, and it's very easy to go in and create new ones if I want. Now, the other service is called Zapier. So Zapier is slightly different from If This Then That in the fact it is more commercial. So you do get a number of free zaps or free automation processes a month, but typically you would need to go in and pay for any additional options that you require. But the other big advantage that Zapier does provide is simply the range of applications that it connects to. So you'll see here in this website, I have a list of the applications that Zapier can connect to. And I'm just going to scroll through and give you some indication of the pure size and number of services that Zapier can connect to. So as we scroll to these, we're not even a quarter of the way through. You'll see there's just about every sort of web service that you can think of. And obviously in here there are Azure services, there are Office 365 services, there's a whole range of things. So now you can start tying together not only Office 365 services, but also any other additional services that you may have, link them together in an automated process to save you time. So maybe taking something from your accounting software into Excel or into SharePoint is going to give you a large amount of options. So again, Zapier has a huge amount of connectors to different services, and again that means it gives you a far greater amount of flexibility when it comes to creating automated process with software and services that you are probably using already. Now, of course, a lot of these services are third-party services, and there could be issues when it comes to compliance. So what we've got now from Microsoft is a new service called Flow. So Flow's been around for a little while, and it allows us to work in a similar method to If This Then That and Zapier, but for it to be within the Office 365 environment, maintaining compliance and keeping information in that process. So we can use Flow to do things like notifications, synchronize files, collect data, and automate a range of approvals. All right, so it's an automation engine that sits behind Office 365 and connects to all the services in Office 365 as well as third-party services. So the best way to give you an indication of exactly what Flow is let's go out and do a demo of Flow. Okay, so we're looking at Microsoft Flow here, and what we can see is I have a number of flows already. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and create a new flow from a blank. You'll see that's suggesting a number of templates, or I'm just going to go in here and create it on the fly. Now what I want to do is if I go back to my original SharePoint site, you'll see that I have a list here called tweets. Now what I want to do is I want to collect tweets that mention the hashtag Office 365, so hash Office 365, and I want to put them in this list automatically. So the way that I do that is I go to my flow, and what's going to trigger this? So the trigger is going to be Twitter. So we need to add our Twitter connection, and in this case when a tweet is posted. Alright, so now it says, okay, what's the search text we want to use? So we want to trigger this when we see a hashtag mentioning Office 365. So let's go in and create a new step. We're going to add an action here, and what we want to do is we want to connect to SharePoint. Okay, now the SharePoint site we want to connect to is this one here. So what we need to do is just go out and take a copy of that location. Let's go back to our flow. Alright, so in SharePoint, what do we want to do? We want to create an item, so we select that in our flow. We need to then put in the SharePoint site that we're going to connect to. Alright, and then once it verifies that, it's going to basically go in and say, okay, the lists that are in that site are these, and the one we want is tweets, so we select that. Now then it's going to say, okay, in that list, what do you want the title field to be? In this case, we want the title field to come from the tweet text. So you'll see here we have dynamic content that is being pulled by the services we are using. So when a new tweet is posted that mentions hash Office 365, we want to take that, put that into our SharePoint list in that location. So I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do is just go in and create that flow. All right, and then go done. Now you'll see that I get a list of what's happening here. I'll get the run history. So when things start happening here, it gets triggered. I'll be able to go and see these. I can see the connection, so I can see how I'm connected to these services, as well as who are the owners of this flow. So at this point, the flow owner is just me. I can go back in and edit it. You'll see that I also get the option here. I can submit it as a template, which we'll come to. I can share it, and I can turn that flow on and off. So in the background, that should be running. So what we'll do is let's pop back to the SharePoint list. We'll just refresh the page here and see that if we have any items. So no items have come through as yet. So let's just pause the video until a couple of items have started coming through for this automation process. So you'll see now that I have a number of tweets that appear in my list here that have been picked up by the automation process. So if I go back to the automation process here and I go into and look at my run history, you'll see here are the 2 successes. If I select that, go into that, I can drill into the details and see the information about how that has succeeded. I've got the option here to resubmit and to also go in and edit the flow. Now, Flow will give us some advantages. We can obviously go in and create our own flows, but you'll see that we have firstly a number of different templates that we can select from up here. So you don't have to necessarily go out and create your own flows yourself. What you can do is you can select from the existing templates that are up there, copy these into your environment, add the connection to your own individual services, and then what you can do is take advantage of those. Now you'll see that a lot of these processes here, or these templates, are from Microsoft, but as we get further down, you'll notice that these also are templates that are submitted by third parties, right? So this template library is going to continue to grow over time, and you can certainly use that as a basis. You'll see that there is a number of options to allow you to filter down to this. Now, if we have a look at the different connectors, so these are the services that we can connect to with Flow. You'll notice that there are many, not quite as many as Zapier perhaps, but there are certainly a growing list of applications that you can quickly and easily connect to here in Microsoft Flow. Again, you'll notice third party as well as the Microsoft options as well. So lots of connections to the Microsoft services are available in here. So with that, why don't we move back on and do a little bit deeper into our flow. All right, so Flow again gives you this ability to get quickly started with lots and lots of templates, as I mentioned. Now you can take those templates and you use a visual designer, which I showed you quickly, and you can then embed information from previous services into your flow, so you can take names, addresses, file names, all sorts of stuff without you having to write code. It's all drag and drop based. Now, Microsoft Flow will also allow you to do advanced things like multi-steps. You can do branching, lots of options that are available with Microsoft Flow. So it is certainly a very sophisticated tool and becoming more powerful at every step. Now, you can also integrate with third-party applications, and you can even go as far as integrating with your own custom APIs. That's the flexibility that Microsoft is going to give you. Now, if we look at the business application platform these days, we are able to build these modern business apps quickly by using tools that empower power users. So we have things like Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow that can allow us to go in and then create these applications quickly and easily without low-level coding. But if we want to, these are going to connect to the common data model and connectors and gateways. So this means that we can now go out and start extending this beyond just what you see. So what you may not realize is that Flow effectively is built on something called Azure Logic Apps. So it is a simplified version of Azure Logic Apps. Remember that Office 365 identity is built on Azure, so if you add an appropriate subscription, you can start creating Logic Apps as well. And these applications can work between each other and make calls. So we have a set of tools that are connecting to the common data platform. Now that means that Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow can connect to these, and thanks to additional cloud services connectors and on-premises data connectors, we can go in and access this information. We can also use pro development tools like Visual Studio to give us even more access and more power when it comes to creating these automated processes. So again, we can allow Logic Apps and Flows to call each other. They can trigger each other. So again, because they're built on this common platform, we get this ability to extend them even further. Now, as I mentioned, the templates are there in the library for you to use. You can share these templates with other people once you submit them to Microsoft for verification. And what's coming will be the ability to lock those templates down to an individual organization. Okay, so what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to say, these are the templates that I only want to use in my business, and these are the services which I allow in my business. So you may not allow connection to Facebook or Twitter, and you may only allow these templates to work within your business. So this is something that Microsoft is bringing to the environment to, again, improve that compliance requirement when it comes to doing templates. So with that, let me give you an idea of some of the more advanced flows that I use and have set up, and the roles that they play in assisting me doing some of the things I need to get done. Okay, so if we go into my flows, what you'll see here obviously is the flow that I created, but these are a number of other flows that I have. So, for example, one of the ones that I use here is a registration process. So users submit to be part of a regular webinar that I run, and then what happens is that because no registration confirmation process is built in to Skype for Business, which is the tool that I use to do the webinars, I've created that process here in Flow. So when they register using a type form, it will then take that information, that will trigger it. It will take some of the fields from that type form response, and it will put it into an email and then send them confirmation of that webinar directly. Now, not only can I do that, what I can then do is I can continue on, for example, and I can create an item in a SharePoint list. So what I do is I take that registration information and I write that into a SharePoint list. Now this is going to give me more power when it comes to doing marketing, capturing more information. So again, the great thing about Flow is that we can continue on to do even more processes beyond the standard. So most registration software simply allows you to capture the user's information and maybe export it to a spreadsheet. In this case, I can not only do that, but I can also keep going. So I could do further work with this thanks to Flow. Now, another one that I've got here is basically an automated engine that will send recurring tweets. So what this does is this gets triggered at a certain time. It goes to a SharePoint list. It goes and looks up an item in a SharePoint list with the corresponding date. It takes the text from that and then automatically sends that out via Twitter. So that allows me to have a list of regular recurring tweets and for that to be a totally automated process as well. So again, it's going to help me automate my marketing on a regular basis. Now, one of the other things that Flow now gives us, and is very important this day and age, is the mobility option. So if you look at the mobile application of Flow, you'll notice that one of the options it has here is something called Flow buttons. Okay, so what that means is that I can push a button on my app and that will then automate a Flow process for me immediately. So what I've created here is a basic flow that I can use on my mobile device that will block out an hour in my calendar basically immediately. Okay, so you can see that we're here on the mobile device. I've logged into Flow. So down the bottom here, if we have a look, you can see these are the common flows that I've been running, and this is obviously the Twitter one we just created. You can see when it was last run, so I can get all access to this on my mobile device. But you'll notice that I have an option here which I called out before, which is the flow button. So now what I can do is simply press that button, and that will go and then run that flow for me automatically from my mobile device. So again, makes it much easier to manually commence a flow process basically from the mobile app. And again, we've got access to a range of options here when it comes to our mobile device. So let's just pop over and have a look at the calendar, see whether that reservation has come through. Okay, so if we have a look at our calendar here, you'll see that the calendar blocked out from Microsoft Flow. So that has added an hour as expected using that automated process using the buttons in Flow. So again, that is another option that we've got here. So one of the really good indications, I think, of the power that you can call on when it comes to Flow is if we go down here and find the Power BI option here. So let's look at the Power BI templates. So you'll see this is, we can connect to our Power BI, but this one here is, I think, extremely powerful. It allows you to run sentiment analysis on tweets. So what it does is takes a set of Twitter, so you can look for a certain hashtag, you can feed that into Microsoft Cognitive Services, and then what you can do is then throw that out into Power BI to get graphs. So if you're looking to determine whether tweets are positive, negative, angry, happy, whatever, you take that, run it through Cognitive Services, and then spit it out to a Power BI dashboard, which is extremely powerful and not something that you would have had access to even a few years ago. All right, so what we can do is we can now start connecting our flows to, as I mentioned, custom APIs. So if you want to have the ability to go and code against or to contact your own devices, you can certainly do that with the API connection. Typically, the connector is going to be built around a web API, so basic OAuth and API key, and you're going to trigger it typically by webhooks. Now, how do we get Flow? Where is Flow available to us? So we can get Flow a number of different ways. There is a basic version, a free version, which gives you a limited number of flows per month. And then when we get Office 365, the users get around 2,000 flows, and we do have a individual Flow 1 and Flow Plan 2 that are available in Office 365. Now, we also get Flow once we start playing with Power Apps. So if we start doing Power Apps, which is Microsoft way now of doing automated forms, you'll see that we also do get a number of flows per month that are included in those options. So again, lots of different ways to get Flow. If you have Office 365 already, you do have Flow built in, but if you do have the standalone plans, you can have also access to so many flows per month. Now, another automation option to consider is that which is now part of Microsoft Teams. So where is that automation process in Teams? The way that this is surfaced is typically through bots. So bots are an addition to your Microsoft team, and they can do a range of things. They can do polls, they can do travel arrangements, a whole range of options here, and they're growing every day. So again, let's pop out and have a look at the way that we can do these automated processes within Teams. So see here that I've added a number of bots to my team. You'll see that I've got the T-bot here. So let's go in and ask this, for example, question which I've asked before. You'll see is how to delete a bot. So when I initiate that, the bot will go out, do a search, and come back and ask us for that information. Now that's the one-on-one chat that I've got. But if I go into my Teams here, you'll see that what I can do is if I go into this general area, you'll see that I basically have a bot that's already responded. So what I'm going to do is going to call that same bot. In this case, it's the Hipmunk bot. So I'm going bot, and I'm going to call that, and then I'm going to ask it to go out and get the best price to fly from Sydney to Melbourne. Now, as you'll see, it'll come back and give me the options here, and I'll then give me a card as to what it's found, and I can take further actions on that. So what you'll see here is that when it comes back, I'll get an indication of the cost, the time to fly, plus I'll get additional options that I can take. So if you start thinking about the automation processes that are possible that you do on a regular basis, the bots are a great way to do it. So the bots come back here and says this is the price to fly between these dates. You'll see that I get the flight options, I get the hotel options, and I can create a fare alert. Now, if you go back to the chat, you'll notice that, for example, I've even got advanced bots which allow me to connect to things like Azure. So how do you add a bot? You go into the search up the top here, and you'll see there's an option here for Discover Bots. So this is the list of current bots that are available, and these are growing on a regular basis. So make sure that you check back regularly, and you can add those to your individual chat, or you can add them to a team if you have the rights to do that. So go in and have a look at the bot, and remember that if we can automate a bot that connects to Azure, Azure can then kick off another automation process. So again, the advantage of the Microsoft ecosystem is a lot of these tools are now interlinked together, which gives you the power of that one interface, that one login, and you can really do a huge amount of automation once you start cascading and tying these sort of options together. So now that we've covered the probably the more citizen developer, the ones without code, we probably do need to talk about one of the real power automation options, which is around PowerShell. So PowerShell is a scripting language that allows you to access typically Microsoft services on-prem and also in the cloud, Azure and Office 365, and you can really do a huge amount of things here. And again, the best way to give you an idea of what is possible is just to pop out and to give you a quick demo. So here I am in my PowerShell integrated scripting environment. You'll see that I've got two scripts here. So the first script here is one that will allow me to connect to my Office 365 environment. Now, the good thing about scripting is there's plenty of examples of these scripts publicly available on the internet. You just need to find them, copy them, and start using them. So in this case, what it does, you'll see, is that it will connect to Office 365, it will connect to SharePoint, it will connect to Skype, and also my mailboxes. So all I need to do basically is go in and run this, and then what it's going to do for me is it's going to prompt me to log in to my tenant. All right, so I put in my login credentials, and then what it's going to do is it's going to go out and connect to Office 365, connect to SharePoint Online, connect to Exchange Online, and that's going to mean that I can run all sorts of commands against those when it's finished. So again, I could just have taken that script and brought it in and started using it. Now, the big advantage of scripting is that I can run it and get the same result every time. When I've got the script working, I can then offload that script to others and they can run it and they will get exactly the same result. And this is going to, again, make a lot of the processes that are done regularly much more consistent. So if you think about creating users in Office 365 regularly, using a script is always going to deliver the same result. It's always going to turn on the right options. It's always going to make sure things are configured the same rather than going in there manually. And it's also going to allow you to do it much quicker. So you can run the script, walk away, and know that you're going to get the same result. All right, so our script to connect to Office 365 has finished. Now I'm going to go to this second script, which again looks rather complex, but again, it was just borrowed from the internet. And all I'm going to do here is simply run this script. And what it'll do is it will go out and it will determine the locations of the mailboxes in my tenant, which data centers they are located. So as you can see, I have a number of mailboxes typically located in US data centers. So that script again was just taken as a standard script from a library, but it's able to give me that result. I'm able to run it as many times as I want. So PowerShell, remember, is a scripting tool, it is a programming tool. You do need to know how to do the programming and the syntax if you want to create your own code. But once you can do that, once you're able to get it operational, again, you're able to run this over and over and over again and really get to some real low-level detail, not only in Azure, Office 365, but also with your on-prem environment. So PowerShell really is the high end when it comes to automation in things like Office 365. Okay, with that said, we probably need to look at rounding things off. So what are the takeaways from all this information? So the first takeaway is there's lots and lots of ways to connect and automate in Office 365. There are various ways to do it. You use whatever's most comfortable with you for you. So you can start with something simple and then upgrade from there. And that means there are lots and lots of ways that you can automate common business processes. What stuff are you doing regularly? What stuff are you doing as a repetition that really should be automated for consistency and also time saving? You can now combine things like Flow and Power Apps to deliver complete, fully blown solutions. So Power Apps allows you to basically develop an app, put it on your mobile device without the need to execute or to compile code. You can then use the Flow to automate processes in the background. You can also use things like Flow buttons to, again, kick off those automations immediately. So lots and lots of options there, both with Flow and Power Apps. Remember that Flow can also reach in, thanks to some of the connectors, into your on-prem environment. It can reach into information. It can automate processes there, potentially run PowerShell. It can execute Azure functions as well. So lots of options with something like Flow. Again, don't think of it as its own little environment. Think of it as something that could be used to reach out to other environments and kick off other automation processes. Remember that the tools are always being improved, and it's going to enable an army of citizen developers. So this means that inside your business, rather than having a small number of coders or having to pay for coders, you can basically empower citizen developers, the people to go and write code, use Flow and Power Apps and things like that to solve their own problems. Now, that is a two-edged sword. Obviously, it allows them to do that on their own, but it may also promote the fact that they do things inefficiently because they aren't skilled coders. They don't have that experience. So part of it may be a learning process for them to learn how to do things better, but generally it would seem that if they get the result that you're after, that's really what you're going to do to improve your productivity. So a number of resources that are available to you. The slides are available at the end of this presentation. I'll show you the link to get to those. So final thought here, just to round off, is that if tools like Flow are basically blocks of connections to services and blocks of actions, okay? So the way we create them is we take a block, we put a bit of information into it, we connect it to another block, and that then executes a process. Now, in our example where we connected to Twitter and pulled that information into SharePoint, how long would it take a machine to actually write that code? If we said, this is what we want to do, it went out and said, okay, well, I need to get the Twitter block. I put that in, I add some code there, then I try this block, then I try that block. So it just works through an iterative process of adding the blocks that are available until it gets the end result that it wants. So it's not very efficient in doing that, but machines are very good at doing repetitive processes like that. So I would think that it is quite possible in the near future that we'll see machines basically being able to code themselves using something like Flow. They will take the blocks, work through them iteratively until they get the result that is desired. So once they've got that one result, then they can then use that to build the next one, to build the next one. So potentially you could just say, look, I want this input and this is the output I want. I don't care how you code it, just go away and do it. And the machine diligently goes away and connects block after block after block after block until it gets the result it wants. So it is probably an indication that we are headed to a world where machines can typically code for themselves once we define what we want them to do for us. So again, if you do want a copy of the slides, you can find them at this URL. They are posted up there for you to download and to view. Appreciate you taking the time to listen and view this presentation. And of course, I do have a range of additional resources, including my blog, SharePoint training, a podcast, and online courses as well. So at that point, again, I'll thank everybody for listening. If you do have any questions, please hit me up on the social, send me an email, leave some comments here. Again, I hope it's given you some information, some ideas about automation when it comes to Office 365, the range that is possible. I hope it also has made you think and challenged you to go back and look at what you can automate in your environment to make your productivity greater and also give you more free time and basically put you back in charge of the technology.